SVC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
Over the last few years, there have been several high-profile incidents where student athletes have been punished after being found to have placed bets on prohibited sports. But that era could soon be coming to an end, as the NCAA have proposed to change their rulebook to allow student athletes and staff to bet on professional sports. Is this a sensible solution, bringing the college sports scene in line with the vast majority of state law? Or is it a slippery slope into a whole new world of integrity issues? We'll discuss all that and more, including an update on all things prediction markets on today's episode of iGaming Daily, supported by Optimove, the creator of positionless marketing and the #1 player engagement platform. I'm Charlie Horner, and today I'm joined by our managing editor, Jessica Welman. Jess, how are you doing?
I am good. So, speaking of Optimove, apparently their sweeps breakfast was the same time as the sweeps panel during G2E. And I made the mistake of going to the sweeps panel and hearing the same old four people give the same old anti-sweeps argument, not realizing that Matt Kaufman from Eilers and Krejcik was doing the keynote over the Optimove thing. So, Optimove guys, invite me next time. I don't want to hear Howard Glazer go on and on again.
Well, it's good to know that we provided a strong recommendation to our listeners. Let's dive into this, Jess, because this is a really interesting one. Because back in the early days of iGaming Daily, it felt like we were talking about integrity issues, particularly with student athletes, quite a lot. We haven't mentioned it on the show for a little while. But could you just bring our listeners up to speed? What is the NCAA proposing to do?
Okay, so it is just wild that this is, I was telling Charlie before the show, it's wild that this is news, that it's happening. And it's even more wild that it came out, granted it came out during G2E, people are busy and stuff, but like, I didn't see anybody get this upset with the idea that the NCAA is considering, which is allowing student athletes to bet on professional sports. You can't do college, you can't touch college, but if you want to bet on pro sports, then it would be okay for you to do that. So that was the proposition. The Division I committee of NCAA has approved it. For those of you that do not follow college sports, the NCAA is divided into tiers. So the one that you guys hear about across the pond is almost always Division I. Big schools, big budgets, those NIL deals you'll hear about. Division II, and then even more so Division III, these are schools with athletic programs, but these are not athletes that are really like aspiring to be in the NFL. It's more that these are truly what it was intended to be. Like you're getting a scholarship to play soccer at a school so that you can afford getting a degree. And that's kind of the level of competitiveness of it. It's still competitive, don't get me wrong, but it's just not. You also generally don't see betting odds on 2 and 3 very often, because you're getting so granular and down into the weeds on this. I'm sure tech will make that not the case eventually, but like for bookmakers, keeping track of like Division III women's soccer in the Southeast, just not something I have a tremendous amount of time for.
No, I can't imagine the liquidity in those markets is very big at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is an interesting one, because there's been plenty of coverage of the infractions over the last few years. So why is the NCAA thinking about letting its student athletes bet on pro sports? Is it that, as you say, maybe the Division II, Division III student athletes, then they're not, or they're probably not going to be professional athletes, and you may as well just let them get in on the action like everyone else in their age group across the country?
I mean, I think some of this is just practicality. So they have an investigation unit within the NCAA, and it's just like, is this really a group that you want to spend egregious amounts of time trying to determine if somebody bet on the Super Bowl and they're an athlete? And so, it's almost like triage. You have to kind of prioritize how much this enforcement group really needs to focus on, because when there was no college betting, I'm sure there was plenty of time to do this. Now that there is college betting, I think that it's just, there's so much going on and making sure that your own sports and stuff are being dealt with, that it's just not necessary going forward. So like in their statement, the Division I Student Athletic Advisory Committee, which is the students themselves representing their side of things, they said, "We believe this change represents meaningful progress towards a culture that prioritizes education, transparency, and support over punishment. By removing unnecessary barriers, we are hopeful that student athletes and athletic administrations will feel empowered to come forward, seek help, and engage in open dialogue without fear." So, it's one of those where it's just like, they'll still be monitoring it, but like to punish people because they bet on that and have them miss games or lose their scholarship is on the way to being a thing of the past.
Yeah, and coming from a European perspective, or particularly a UK perspective, footballers can't bet on football, whether that's in the UK or whether it's in the US or anywhere. Same with other sports. But a footballer can bet on, say, rugby or NFL. And I guess you could argue that on one side that the NCAA is trying to do something similar to that. On the other side, you could say that, they are reducing the betting infractions by just not really making them infractions anymore. What side of the argument do you sort of come down on this?
This is the piece of this that I need to read it, but I don't think that they have a carve out for this. Like, if you told me you could bet on pro sports that are not the sport you participate in, I would feel better about it. Because, like, these guys, if you go to, say, Ohio State, top ranked football program in the country, basically, right now, plenty of these guys are going to the NFL year in and year out. And you know them because you were on the football team with them. You have them in your phone. You send Snapchats or Instagram DMs to them. Like, I don't love that you can wager on like player props of people that you went to school with less than 2 years ago. That part makes me nervous. But like the NCAA is going to be more careful about this than anyone, that I think they're looking into this and making sure that this kind of stuff is very much watched. I'm sure that they would keep a closer eye on the sports in which you are involved in. But yeah, I mean, the MLB, for example, it goes backwards. Like if you graduate from college after playing baseball and go to the MLB, you are not allowed to bet on college baseball. You aren't even allowed to bet on like Japanese baseball. So I wish that it was a rule that was more like in your sport, you can't. That being said, you're going to be in the athletic facility. Maybe you know the basketball players, maybe you know the baseball players, but there's not this like, I've watched Teodoro McMillan in practice every day for 2 years and I know what he's good and bad at. So I'm going to go wager on him. That piece of it does make me just a smidge nervous, but I just in general hate.
Well, no, I understand that
like
argument.
That they're doing this, but I don't like that issue is still there.
Sure. Yeah, there's certainly that part of it that makes or will make certainly some people uncomfortable. I think something else that might make some people uncomfortable as well is, that responsible gambling, play protection sort of angle as well, because, well, I mean, let's park the issue that some of these student athletes might not even be old enough to bet, full stop.
Yeah, most of them aren't. So I think that's the other thing is it's just like, well, if you're going to legally bet, the number of people who are 21 plus in the NCAA ecosystem is a minority.
Exactly. So there'll be plenty of people who say, well, should the NCAA be promoting, well, not promoting gambling, but essentially decriminalizing it within their own policies to an audience who are essentially too young to bet, and also who could be particularly vulnerable to problem gambling. We know that typically the most vulnerable people to problem gambling are those usually males between the age of 18 and 24. So I'm sure there will be plenty of stakeholders who have concerns about that as well.
Well, I think too, though, that you can argue that this is helpful. And that's kind of what the quote was suggesting. This is probably helpful on the responsible gambling and education front, because if somebody is betting a lot on something that they're allowed to bet on, they're going to be more inclined to like talk to people about it. It's going to be a little more out in the open. People will see it. There's more opportunities to intervene and kind of educate and things like that. But in this extremely strict environment that they're in, where you can't do any of that, you're hiding it all. So I think the same argument you make of like bringing sports betting out in the open, bringing their betting activity out in the open so that you can see what they're doing and potentially like talk to them about limits and that sort of thing before this incident turns into a problem is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are plenty of organizations who sort of go into college campuses and do sort of education sessions with these student athletes about the dangers of gambling as well. So I guess there are protection mechanisms in place. Just quickly before we go to a break then, Jess, can you think of any instances over the last couple of years that we've sort of spoken about where these proposed rule changes would have prevented any previous bans or enforcement action or people losing scholarships or anything like that?
I'm sure that there are. It's just not, I don't think they've lost scholarships, but I think you look at like that Iowa State where there were like 68 people. I'm going to guess some of those were probably people betting on professional sports. I think it's more, I'm not sure what. And then keep in mind, you can probably go find the iGaming Daily episode where we talked about this. This is like the third or fourth rules relaxation for the NCAA on this front. So we've been taking incremental steps along the way that I think even if you were caught betting on something else at this point, it's like a warning or you just sit out like one game. I think we've already reduced it a fair amount. I'm sorry that one doesn't just immediately jump out to me, but there are so many cases that we've looked into, and generally it does seem to be at the college level that I'm glad that's where we're focusing going on. Do you have one? I don't have one off the top of my head.
No, I would have cited that Iowa case as well because that was such a widespread case.
Yeah, I don't think 68 people across 2 universities in different parts of Iowa are colluding. So,
yeah. Sure. Well, Jess, if listeners want to keep up to date with this, then we'll leave a link to your story or Justin's story in the show notes and keep an eye on SBC Americas for all the latest updates on that one. We'll go for a quick break and then we'll come back and bring you all the latest developments on a storyline that just won't go away.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Welcome back to iGaming Daily. Jess, you were at G2E last week, and we all thought that sports contracts and prediction markets would steal the show. You were there all week. Did that come to pass?
Yeah, if you had a contract on, yes, this would be anything and everything people were discussing, you would have made a lot of money. It was all over the place on at least the conference side. Caveat, like, I'm a member of the media. I think that these conversations on the floor and the gaming floor is very substantial, continue to be what they are for the most part, because it's a land-based conference and that sort of thing. The educational content, though, this was every panel. Somehow something came up. Like I was on a panel about AI and audience engagement in the NBA. And even beforehand, we had to say, like, what do we do if someone asks about prediction markets? Because you just never know. To me, the most interesting part was the opening remarks from Bill Miller, the AGA president and CEO, and that trio of CEO interviews on the first full day of the floor being open. Bill Miller came out like hard against prediction markets, called out the Josh Sterling quote that I will say continues to bring my site traffic. So look that one up. Josh Sterling, SBC Americas and Google will give you all of his unedited thoughts, including the idea that consumer protection is not something the government should be involved in. And just like this is illegal, just flat out, this is illegal. Next up, Peter Jackson, the CEO of Flutter, came in and as the incredibly well-trained media person that he is, very much tiptoed around things. You know, the CME deal, the deal with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group that we still don't quite know what it's going to look like. He's like, it might involve sports. We'll see. Who knows? We just are curious about growing into new play. He kept it very vague. Jason Robbins, who I would say generally people say media training is not his strongest suit, was a little more open about it. I mean, still properly cagey, but just saying, like, as a publicly traded company interested in how people engage with sports, it would be like derelict of us to not look into this new market that people are using to engage in sports. But he was very honest as to what this was. He's like, this is a market access play. If people in California and Texas and Georgia want to participate in something that is akin to sports wagering and they can do so through these kinds of markets, why would we not look into that? But he also was just like, this product is not something that's going to supplant the DraftKings Sportsbook product. You know, like the same game parlays and all that stuff, he believes will still be out front. And then you have Bill Hornbuckle, who is the CEO of MGM Resorts, which is half owner of BetMGM, who is just like, we're looking at it. And there's that phrase, you know, if you can't beat them, join them. He's still on the first half of that sentence where he and I think other land-based focused operators that are AGA members are really focusing on beating them first. And it's because there's just a huge difference in like the risk calculus here, right? For DraftKings and Flutter, FanDuel rather, this is the business. It's all online. For Caesars and MGM and Rush Street, you also have brick and mortar casinos that make way more money. And if you're going to potentially endorse something that if in the courts is ruled to be okay, you are opening the door on federal gambling oversight. And you do not want that to permeate the other aspects of your business. And he didn't quite go that far in saying it, but he's like, I think you just have to like forest from the trees, be aware that there are federal implications to this that are a little bit terrifying.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that's why Bill Miller was so against prediction markets, because I guess the AGA just wouldn't want that federal oversight on any form of gambling, never mind just prediction markets.
Keep in mind, the AGA is a trade organization with several partners at various tiers. And I think at least 7 of their partners have some sort of deal like this in place to go and do this or are working actively towards doing it. So like, this isn't like sweeps or DFS plus, in which AGA membership was very unified for the most part on how they stand on it. This is an AGA issue in which this group, I don't envy them, has to kind of walk the tightrope of are we or aren't we doing this? And it kind of, to give you an idea how old I am, it kind of reminds me of like 10 years ago when AGA was still not sure how they felt about online gambling, period, because the membership was very divided on whether that was something you should do or not. So it's like the second version of that where you kind of have, I think they're going to go where the wind blows, like that if it is something, and Hornbuckle said this, if this is something that it's just like, fine, we lost, the membership is going to go with it. But in the meantime, I think there's still just a big part of this industry that understands the desire to fight this because it's not just sports betting that is potentially impacted. I think we already are seeing certain contracts that look very casino-y being floated around places.
We did posit that. I think we did it semi-ironically.
I've been saying the contract, will the ball land on red or black, is not far off. And like, yeah, I was being somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but yes, this has been, this has been the play from the beginning. And if you listen to comments from Kalshi CEO Tarek Mansour, he wants to be like, this is the app I go to for investing, for betting on myself, whether it's my knowledge of like who's going to get married on Love is Blind or, whether or not this blackjack hand is going to win. That's their goal. They've been saying it from the jump. And I think if you look at Shane Copeland, the Polymarket CEO, I think he has similar aspirations. And they're not just the U.S. Like, Charlie, this is coming soon to a country near you, potentially, because they are talking. I mean, Kalshi just expanded into 140 other countries. Not the UK, but 140 others. I
mean, that's a really, really interesting development that we probably should sort of dive deeper into at some point. But I think this is where Jason Robbins' comments really come into the play, really, because he openly admits this is a market access play. Prediction markets are going to be incredibly popular in New York, Pennsylvania, markets like that, because essentially, look, the DraftKings Sportsbook, the FanDuel Sportsbook, they're probably just going to be a better product than sports contracts, because there's a limitation to what you can do in a sports contract, because it is essentially, will this happen or will it not happen? Maybe the product can develop over time, sure. But I think the sports books for now are going to feel like they've got a strong hand to play because their product is better, or they will perceive that their product is better from a user experience perspective. And yeah, if it turns out that Kalshi can go legally across the country, then yeah, sure. Then you might be able to see prediction markets from DraftKings, FanDuel, et cetera, in California, Texas, and the rest of them. But yeah, I think it's nice to hear a bit of honesty.
Well, if you saw on Monday Night Football a couple of Mondays ago, they picked a real dud of a game with my Cincinnati Bengals and I believe the Detroit Lions. No, not the Lions. What was supposed to be a good game before Joe Burrow getting hurt. They rolled out at Kalshi what looks like same game parlays. Again, clunky compared to the apps. But you could combine contracts into each other to maximize a payout. And they've started doing some version of this, which is kind of what everyone said is like a little bit terrifying. The Broncos. That's right. The embarrassing loss to the Broncos.
Interesting that they are sort of dipping their toes into it, though. Yeah, that is a threat.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they're trying. It's just mechanically, how do you do it? And so we got the first glimpse at kind of how they're working to do it. And that's a fast step. The only thing that's kind of slowing people down right now is the government shutdown. Because with the federal government being shut down, I think they've limited how much you can really self-certify new contracts. So that's the only thing right now that's keeping us from just going to the moon straight away.
Well, talking about the government shutdown, there are two bits of news that I just want to close the show with. One is a little bit old now, but we haven't talked about on the pod, and I think it's important that we mention. Brian Quintenz, we were fairly sure he was going to be the nominee for the CFTC chair, but it appears that's not the case anymore.
If this woman had not missed her flight a few months ago, I think he would be. But because we had a senator who was absent when his original vote was supposed to be taken, and then it got delayed, things got murkier and murkier for Quintenz. And this is where I warn you, do not take the victory lap that gaming killed this. It wasn't. It was crypto bros. As I said to the team, Quintenz got Winklevied. If you recall the social network and the Facebook saga, Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss, those twins, are very invested in crypto. They have a company that had been under investigation at the CFTC, and they basically were kind of pressuring Quintenz to tell them how he would deal with this investigation and how the company would be treated going forward, and didn't like the answers that they got. So now I'm hearing different things. Allegedly, the Josh Sterling, the lawyer we talked about earlier, is in the running. I've heard Mike Seelig, who is with the SEC at the moment, is another potential one. But yeah, while the government is shut down, we're not going to get any progress on that. Okay.
And then finally, Polymarket is gearing up for a relaunch in the US and has got a fresh slate of investments. What's going on here?
$2 billion influx of capital from the company that basically owns the New York Stock Exchange.
Significant.
Yeah, huge. Values the company at $8 billion. They are ready for US. I think, again, Shane Copeland said they were kind of beta testing the product on football this weekend. And they're, again, kind of waiting. I think they have to wait for the government to open back up before they can fully mobilize. Polymarket was pushed out of the US, by the way. The CFTC was like, GTFO. Then they acquired a company that had a DCM license that was already like just freshly approved, and they were ready to come back in. And now the delay is waiting for them. I think the key thing about this investment, and I know we're running long and I'm sorry, but at G2E, someone pointed this out to me. It seems like as much as this maybe, as Robbins and others have argued, is going to be no more than 10% of what the sports betting world is, I think this disruption of the finance side of the world is where a lot of people are eyeing this growth, which is why a group like that who owns the New York Stock Exchange sees the financial possibilities of this and not just this direct sports betting play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the convergence of the finance and entertainment sectors is an interesting one for sure. We'll see how that plays out. All right. Well, Jess, thanks very much for a whistle-stop tour around all the latest from the prediction market side of things. I'm sure we'll do this again next week.
I'll see you 700 more times through 2027.
I'm sure we will. Yeah. Well, thanks again, Jess. And to the audience, thank you very much for listening. And come back tomorrow for another episode of iGaming Daily for all of the latest global gambling news.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.